All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and gavel in. I think I see Evan Johnson walking in the door. He's our speaker for the night, although we're not going to start off with him, but I want to make sure he was at least in the house before we gavelled. Welcome to the September 24, 2025 meeting of the Tampa Heights Civic Association. This is our monthly general meeting. Welcome. We have a small crowd here tonight, but we have over 30 folks online. So online folks, welcome. Glad you could join us. Along those lines, a moment of microphone protocol. We have two mics up here at the podium. I go through this every meeting, so I apologize if it's redundant, but there are always some new folks. Two mics up here at the podium. This one is for in-house. This one that looks like a hockey puck is for the Zoom folks. So the speaker, that would be you, Evan. Just be aware that you have two audiences that you're going to be talking to tonight. And as long as you project well, there should be no problem being heard here or online. When you're asked questions, and I suspect that you will have some questions tonight, those questions probably won't be picked up very well for the Zoom audience. So I'm going to ask you please to repeat the question or at least summarize it so the people at home can hear what you're responding to. That'll make things a little bit easier. I do have some announcements tonight, so let me go through those very quickly. First of all, as you probably know, we have now gotten through the first round of the primary election for the District 5 race for Tampa City Council. We're now in the general election phase. Important that we take note of some dates, please. We have a deadline to register coming right up next Monday, I think it is, September the 29th. So if you're not registered to vote yet, you still can, and you still would be eligible to vote in the general election. Early voting begins October 23 through 26. That's when you physically can go to one of the, I think, 4 early voting sites. Remember, you do not go to your election day polling site for those votes. So again, that's October 23 to 26. And election day is October 28. Vote by mail. I suspect most of you are well aware, but just in case, and for those online, remember that if you want to vote by mail, you have to ask for the ballot. If you haven't already done that, you need to go online, Supervisor of Elections, and ask that the ballot be sent to you so that you can register your vote by mail. If you go that route, remember that your ballot has to be at the Supervisor of Elections office no later than 7 p.m. on the date of the election. Again, that's October the 28th. So those are the critical dates. As far as the candidates, we've got 2 now. We started with 14, now we've got 2, Tom Scott and Naya Young. I think Naya will be here. I don't see her here yet. Oh, there you are. Okay, you snuck in on me. All right, so Naya's here. I don't see Tom Scott in the room. If he shows up, he'll be given an opportunity as well. Not to give a stump speech necessarily, but to say hello and thank you for your support. And I'll call them up or call Naya up in just a moment to do that. Now, we had such a good time last month when we did the forum for the 14, and we're going to do it again. We're, I guess we just like being abused or something. It's a lot of work, but it's a real service to the community, we feel. So we're going to try it again, this time with the 2 that are still standing. This time we are going to be co-hosting the event. It'll be the Tampa Heights Civic Association together with Tea and Conversation. That's the organization that is hosted and brought forward by Candy Lowe. She's been in the politics business for a long time and usually runs these types of forums herself. This time she's going to be consolidating with us for this race. And also Stephanie Pointer and her group THAN is going to be co-hosting with us. And for those of you that don't know, THAN, T-H-A-N, is the Tampa Homeowners Association of Neighborhoods. So those 3 are going to be the hosting organizations, and we are doing this in association like we did the first time around with the League of Women Voters. Our moderators for the event. Last month, we had 1 moderator, Mitch Perry, a journalist of well-known repute, been around for decades in this area and very well versed in local politics. He's coming back for round 2. We've also asked Garrett Greco of the Tampa Bay Developer Podcast to work with us on this. And he's actually, I just found out today, he did a debate style format podcast with the two candidates just this week. When was it, Naya? Yeah. Was it last week? Okay. So he's been down this road already, as has Mitch. Mitch has interviewed these candidates for his radio broadcast and here with us. So both of them will have had experience with these two candidates. And we also have Carrie Getz, who is of Winzig Consulting. I'm not familiar with Carrie, but Taryn Sabia is. Um, her her information online identifies her as an expert in leadership communication. Um, she does apparently training in the MBA level around the country, and she's heavy on humor and satire. So I'm being told that she will be a very entertaining force and a very smart one for exactly what we're trying to do here. So there will be those three moderators, two candidates, and hopefully it'll be a very lively, well-attended event. Again, that is, if I didn't mention it before, or maybe I didn't, October the 9th, it's a Thursday, all right? We had to pick that date in order to avoid conflicts. We're going to open doors at 6 for the candidates to come in and set up. We'll start the forum at 6:30 and we'll close out by 8. So it'll be a little shorter than last time around. Probably get a good hour and 10 minutes worth of Q&A out of that. Some of that time will be taken up with introductions and niceties of various types. But figure on 6:30 to 8 o'clock on October the 9th right here. Okay. Now, just a moment about voter turnout. The voter turnout this last time around, I think, covered right around 12%. That's where it was. We have something like 45,000 voters that were eligible to vote in District 5, and around 5,000 of them showed up to vote. I'll keep my opinion about all that to myself. Suffice to say that, and Tampa Heights performed in accordance with the overall average. We showed up at around 11 to 12% of the vote. I'm just asking that we try to do better, all right? There's a lot of talk going on right now about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and all that good stuff. I learned all about it in civics in high school, and I was a poli-sci major in college. I actually believe all that stuff, but there is no place where we exercise our First Amendment right more powerfully than at the ballot box. And if only 12% of us are showing up, that doesn't say a whole lot for us in terms of civic engagement. We need to do better. And hopefully everyone in this room, if you're District 5, you're going to go and vote, and you'll bring 5 or 10 or 15 of your friends along with you. Bother the hell out of them. Get them to the voting place. Please try. And there's more than one reason for that. It's not just about First Amendment and civic duty. It's about the clout of the neighborhood. Now, when we show up, and by we I mean members of the board, when we show up at public meetings, be it city council or county commission or any one of the various and sundry committees and commissions that they spawn off, it's important when we stand at the podium and we identify ourselves as representatives of the Tampa Heights Civic Association that they view us as a player, that we actually matter to their electoral prospects in the future. And if all you can muster is 500 or 600 votes for a municipal election, they're not going to pay that much attention to you. They'll probably pay more attention to folks up in Seminole Heights or Channelside, because those folks actually show up and vote. I don't like that. I'm usually the one standing at the podium. Brian Seal is standing at the podium a lot. Nicole Peterico was at the podium just a couple of weeks ago. So if it's for no other reason, just understand that when you show up and vote, you're helping your neighborhood to help you. Because ultimately, we have to ask our elected officials to do things, and sometimes they listen to us, sometimes they don't. We can get a louder voice, a more effective voice, if we actually are viewed as a source of votes for them. Lynn Hertek is a classic example of that. She listens to us. She's part of the neighborhood, part of the community. She came from Civic Association work. Her executive assistant, legal assistant is here today because Lynn couldn't make it, but Lynn thought enough of us to send a representative, which we very much appreciate. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, that's it. I'll get off my my soapbox. Other announcements, we have a Robles Park and Pond cleanup on Saturday, September the 27th. The meme that was circulated along with the announcement for this meeting, I think had it as 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning. I believe, having heard from Thomas Murphy, who's been the tip of the spear on this, that he's moving it to 7 o'clock as a start from 7 to 9. If you're interested in being involved in that, the meme has QR codes and also an email address for Thomas. You can email him an RSVP, and then you have to take a quiz. There's a video and a quiz that you have to take after the video in order to be qualified to clean the park. I know, sounds silly. And the quiz was actually pretty hard. I barely passed the damn thing. But in any event, they allowed me to clean the park last month after I took the quiz. So if you want to do that, it's part of a Adopt the Park program with the city of Tampa. There were probably 7 or 8 of us that showed up last month. This month, they're going to focus on the pond itself and cleaning that up. There are going to be some kayaks out there. I'm not going to be in a kayak, but there are going to be some kayaks. They're going to clean up the pond, and the rest of us will be working on the park grounds and the perimeter road surface. So come on out, bring your work gloves. They've got the little reacher things to pick up the trash, and it actually moves pretty quickly. An hour and a half, 2 hours, you'll be done back home having maybe not a beer, but at least a nice cold glass of orange juice. Let's see. All right. Other than Naya, are there any other candidates in the House? Nope. Naya, come on up and give us your after action report. Evan, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Naya Young. Well, first, I want to start, and for those that were present at the candidate forum that we had here, which was awesome. Very good job, Rick and Taryn. It was awesome. And for everyone that voted for me in the primary, I really do appreciate it, and I thank you. If I haven't met you yet or haven't had an opportunity to speak with you, I hope before Election Day, October 28th, I get the chance to speak with you. Rick, I really appreciate you talking about the importance of voting. It's really, really important that we turn out and vote. We did have a little bit of a spike in the numbers for the primary, which was good. But we do have a lot of registered voters in the area. So please, if you're going to, if you're going to vote, we're hoping that you're going to vote. But take someone with you and ask that person to take someone with you so we can really, really turn out and make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to exercise their right to vote. So I'm really happy to be here today. The comp plan is something that is extremely important. And as part of my just on this campaign trail is, in addition to speaking with everyone that live, work, and play in these areas, just getting as much information as possible so that we can make the best decisions that's going to be the best for everybody within District 5. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Evan, for coming. I'm looking forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to our program for tonight. It is now 7:20. I suspect we'll be out of here by 8. Yeah, okay. Unless you all have a whole lot of questions, which is great. You're more than welcome to ask them. But anyway, we have Evan Johnson with us tonight, City Planning Director. He's very specific to make sure to identify himself as the interim City Planning Director, but he's our guy, and he's also of the neighborhood, which is helpful. Evan is going to give us an update on planning initiatives currently underway in the city of Tampa and how they may affect us here in Tampa Heights. We'll be talking about the 2045 comprehensive plan, the update of that, and the land development code update. Just a little bit of background on this too, if I might. Uh, One of the things that has really spun this up for us is we of the members of the board have been talking for some time about our neighborhood plan and how it is we might be able to give our neighborhood plan that was passed by resolution over 20 years ago might actually be given some more teeth, force of law, ordinance, code. And the last year or so, we have talked more than we've acted in getting deeply into the weeds of the neighborhood plan and identifying portions of that plan that could be deleted, other portions that need to be updated, basically get it to a place where it belongs in 2025. Now, overlay on top of that, the comprehensive plan work that is ongoing now, and the thought has come that we should be able to find a way and we should work toward a resolution that allows for us to identify portions of the neighborhood plan that have been around for 2 decades, find portions of that plan that could be incorporated into the comprehensive plan in some way or into code. And then on top of all that, we've got our overlay district that Brian Seal is basically the papa of, sitting right over here. That's another issue on top of that, and how the comprehensive plan might meld in with that. Long story short, we're ground zero here. There's a lot going on in the city of Tampa that's going to affect Tampa Heights, and we need to have a place or 2 or 3 at the table during those discussions. And hopefully the people occupying those places are going to be well informed. City Council will be meeting on this over a period of time between now and February. We'll have chances to go to them and talk to them. So, Evan, get us educated, brother.
Testing, testing. Can you hear me okay? All right. So, boy, I'm really going to disappoint all of y'all because I misread the assignment. I'm going to talk about the comp plan like about that much. Sorry, Kelly. I know you're here to see if I'm making up anything. But I'm actually, because this is a general meeting, there's folks online. I don't know the education level when it comes to the city planning stuff. I don't know where we're at as a room and as a community on the internet. But what I do know is that I've been with the city for 2 years now, and for the last 2 years, we've been working with the Planning Commission. They're our partners in this, on the comp plan update. And if there's one thing I have learned, particularly in the last 3 or 4 months, is that there's a lot of people in Tampa who don't understand how the comp plan works and how the zoning code works. And so I am going to do a little, if you can go to the next slide, Chris. I'm going to do a little bit of background on that because I think it's really important so that you start to understand the terminology. Because when you don't understand it, people get really upset, they get scared, and they come to public hearings and they harass Councilwoman Hurtak and all of us. And it's understandable that they're scared because what they're hearing is not right. And more importantly, if they don't understand the concept, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand the difference. So I'm going to walk a little bit through that. I will give a little bit on the latest on the comp plan update. We had a hearing well, it wasn't a hearing, it was a workshop that was going to be a hearing that didn't quite make it there. But we did that in August. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk about a little bit about the code update. And then I'm here for questions. So I'm going to make this as quick as we can. And yeah, we'll go from there. Thanks, man. Oh yeah, so this is always really important. Depending on, we have to remind everybody at every meeting we go to, city's growing really fast. City continues to grow really fast. We're looking at about 30,000 new units in the next 20 years just to handle the new people. And we're already have a housing crisis in the city. So this is just the new people moving in that are projected to move in. It's always really important to remember this because we cannot stop people from coming to Tampa. And the only thing we can do is raise the prices of property as they come, and we don't build anything. So this is really about planning for that growth, but also planning for how far behind we are when it particularly comes to housing. Next slide. So what does that look like? Well, here's the housing side. If you want to watch tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I'll be going over all this with council. Well, probably 9:30. But we're talking about housing needs tomorrow. But this is a slide from that. And the point of this slide is really from 2020, 58% home value increase in the city. 2020, 44% rent increase in the city. This is citywide, but guess what? Tampa Heights is a very attractive place to live. So as you know, I'm sure it's even more acute of an issue here. The other thing I wanted you to look at is this table on the bottom left here shows you the gap, the number of shortage of housing we have at different income levels. So that's your area median income by household. They are not cumulative. You cannot add them up. They don't mean anything if you add them up. But what if you look at 0 to 50% AMI? Essentially at that level for per households, there's a shortage of 26,000 housing units. Well, we don't have 26,000 families living on the street, but what we have them doing is paying an excessive amount of their income for housing, or they're having to double up, triple up with other relatives, which happens all over the city of Tampa. So the comp plan it's about the vision, but that vision includes making sure that we have housing for the people. These are the people who are already here. This is 26,000 short now. So I want you to remember that as we talk about where we want to push people or direct people to grow, where are the best places for that to happen, of which parts of Tampa Heights are. Next, this is a nice, pretty slide. I think I stole this from the previous planning director. So it just gives you a sense of this is what the comp plan talks about. It talks about the different types of form that development can take. You've got your encore, that's 6, 7 stories in the middle, apartments, not too incredibly big, but garage parking, pretty urban. VM right next door. And then of course, Tampa Palms with all those nice trees. I don't know how many of those trees are still there post storms, but they were pretty when the picture was taken. Next slide. So just for those of you who don't know, Florida has a kind of a two-tiered, two-layered system when it comes to planning for land use. Comp plan is the one that you're hearing most about right now because that's the one that's been going to city council. The comp plan is essentially the vision for the city, and it lays out the land uses and the intensity of development. So basically if there was no rules, how much stuff could we put on a piece of property and what uses could it be? That's what the comp plan does for land use. It also does lots of other things for solid waste and transportation, and it's a huge document. But land use tends to be the one that we focus most on because that's what affects what we see every day, right? What gets built next door and all of that. So we come back to the comp plan. Next slide. So several elements, we already talked a little bit about all of them. I'm glad to talk to you a little bit about, solid waste element if you want. Future land use categories. This is your future land use map. This is your long-term growth map for the city of Tampa. The comp plan gives you general land uses, tells you if you're in this parcel at this location, you're allowed to do these types of uses, and basically how much of it you can do. How many units, how many square feet of a building. And so that's the development intensity and the residential density. Council hears amendments to these all the time. We have 4 cycles a year, and we have a hearing tomorrow night where we'll be talking about some amendments. Not going to read any of this, not important because you can look it up, but each land use category, of which these are just some of the residential land use categories, has a floor area ratio and a maximum density, units per acre. We're going to talk about what that means because it's important. But this is basically what every single land use category in the city, you could go and say, all right, they can do this type of use and it could be this much of it in that location. Next slide. But what is density and what is floor area ratio and what does that mean? So what is a comp plan actually doing? So next slide. So these are just a nice graphic example of density. These are all 1 acre blocks for visual purposes. And it just gives you a sense of there's 1 unit per acre all the way up to, I think that's like 75 units per acre in the upper left-hand corner. But even at 75 units per acre on an acre, that's a lot of development, but you can do it that's 7 stories, thereabouts. But this is when you hear units per acre, this is what they're talking about. How many units you can get on an acre of land in the city. Yes, ma'am.
And could you also explain the idea of
Next slide. Oh, wait, one more density slide. This just gives you a sense of when people talk about density, sometimes higher numbers seem more intimidating. Oh my gosh, 100 units per acre. What does that mean? It's bigger, it's huger. The truth is that density is not form. It's not the size of the building. Density is the number of units. And if you've seen anything on Bayshore, those are very low density, really tall buildings because those units are really big. So this is just an example of, on your left, 124 units an acre. It's got a parking garage. It's, you know, it's pretty intense. But on the right, that's 154 units per acre of density. Probably doesn't have much parking. Probably people park on the street. Looks like something here in the neighborhood or in Davis Island. It's all about scale of the development, how big it is. It's not necessarily about how dense it is. Next slide. So this was what Karen was talking about a little bit. So intensity of development. So density is dwelling units per acre. Intensity is what we call the floor area ratio. Every single land use category has a FAR, floor area ratio, and it has a density. This is an example of what a 1.0 floor area ratio can look like. Floor area ratio is simply the amount of square footage as a ratio over the total amount of land. So in this instance, this is a 1.0 FAR for a, I don't know, 1 acre. Doesn't really matter what size it is. Let's call it an acre. So 1.0 FAR means that's 43,000 square feet, give or take, of land. That's 43,000 square feet of building. Now, that can be done in 1 story, 2 stories, 4 stories. And the comp means the same thing. This is all 1 floor, 1 FAR ratio. And so ultimately, the comp plan controls how much development. It does not control how big it is necessarily. It doesn't control how high it is. That is what the next topic is, the zoning code. But first, we're going to go into this. Since we're talking comp plan, we now got a sense of what comp plan deals with, what it does do, what it doesn't do when it comes to land use. I'm going to give you a brief update for a couple of the big concepts that are a little contentious in and around, particularly places like Tampa Heights. So I was asked to kind of focus on things that we here are dealing with. So first of all, the comp plan is kind of from a policy framework. It's organized around regional activity centers, downtown West Shore, USF, transit-ready corridors. These are a lot of the corridors you already know, but major corridors that either have significant transit service on them now or have been planned for significant transit service in the future. Make a lot of sense to support transit. Any one of those things that HART has been looking at, we've worked with HART to come up with the list. Context-sensitive neighborhoods is a place like Tampa Heights, away from the corridor, is a place that has a lot of growth pressure. It's got a lot of new development pressure coming in. It's growing, it's changing. It's not necessarily don't build anything here ever, but there is concern about what it looks like, how it feels, how it fits into the neighborhood. So those are context-sensitive neighborhoods. We did a presentation after a summer of workshops in the community, of which there was one for District 5. And we brought recommendations to the August 28th to City Council to talk to them about. I'm only going to cover a couple of the major concepts that we discussed related to Tampa Heights. And I'm glad I can opine with you anytime and answer questions about any of these. So transit-ready corridors. This is probably one of the more contentious policy recommendations. Within 1/8 of a mile of a transit-ready corridor, it's about 660 feet either side, about 2 blocks of typical neighborhood blocks, is your transit corridor from the main corridor. So in this instance, we talk about Tampa Street, Florida Avenue, Columbus, MLK. That's what we recommended to council. Within that area, you are eligible for up to a 50% bonus. That means 50% more development could potentially be allowed on your property if you're within that area. However, this is where the rubber hits the road. First, you have to give an affordable housing set aside. So that 50% only comes if you meet the requirements to actually set aside affordable housing units. And those would be memorialized in an agreement. Right now, it's an agreement that council has to approve. And we actually do the tracking to make sure that these units remain affordable. So it's not an easy lift. We just don't give that density away. You actually have to do something public benefit. You have to give us a public benefit to do it. So those are the ones that were proposed to Tampa Street, Florida, Columbus, and MLK. So we'll come back to that. I'm sure there'll be some questions. There's additional other bonuses that are outside of those transit-ready corridors that I talked about. That includes an affordable housing bonus. That includes a green building bonus and a resiliency bonus, which really doesn't affect Tampa Heights because it's focused on the coastal high hazard area, which is some of the more low vulnerable, think very South Tampa, Palmetto Beach, parts of Channelside. Those are all in the coastal high hazard area. So these are all bonuses that would be eligible for areas essentially outside of the R10 land use category. That is the most common land use category in the city. It's R10 means 10 units an acre. It is primarily single family homes. It is probably the most significant land use amount in Tampa Heights as well, is the R10. So outside of the R10, you can't do the bonuses in the R10. So it doesn't really affect those areas. This affects the corridors. This affects the R20s and above. So this is something that's a little bit more focused on those areas where you'd be seeing that transition of intensity of development down, but not, for the most part, not in the core of what you would think of as more of a traditional single family neighborhood. That's what's been proposed. And then finally, the last piece was townhomes in the R10. So again, if I had 2 lots and I wanted to build a couple of townhomes under R10, I would have the ability to do that. We've tried to identify specific corridors, roadways, where it made the most sense for you to be allowed to build townhomes. There was a little bit of consternation and some issues with that, depending on the neighborhood. They didn't like kind of the broad brush. So the motion and the direction from council, which we'll talk about in a second, kind of modified that a little bit to remove those specific locations. Yes, sir. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Technically, yeah. Oh, sorry. The question had to do about, and I'm not sure what meeting it was, but the discussion at the meeting was changes that would allow for multiple housing types on a variety of lots, like a typical lot. Yeah, like a standard single family house lot or something like that. So the density in R10 is not going to allow you at just 10 units an acre. It's not going to give you enough density to do 2 units on a typical lot. Now you could do an accessory dwelling unit. That is allowed. So you could have your main house and you could have an accessory dwelling unit behind it. That is allowed. That's in the code. That's in the overlay. But we wouldn't have enough density in that instance. If you were in a R20, you could do 2, and with about a lot and a half, you could probably do 3. And then you can get into, is it a duplex, a triplex, townhomes? We can get into all the nomenclature, but 2 to 6 unit type development. Yeah. Oh, that's zoning. That's zoning. Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Yeah, that's a little bit more zoning. Next slide. So when we went to do our presentation, it was much better than this one. But we talked through with council what we'd learned from all the workshops we did over the summer, the survey that we had, and essentially the direction we got was to take, for Tampa Heights, this is related to Tampa Heights, was to remove some of the transit-ready corridors. So really, the way the proposal works right now is we're down to Florida Avenue as a transit-ready corridor. Townhomes in the R10, as I mentioned, we propose saying like, if you're on a arterial roadway, which is kind of a larger roadway, bless you. You're an arterial roadway. You could do it if you're in the R10. We ended up removing that, and at least the request from council was to keep the language as is. The language as is basically says limited townhomes in the residential 10 category. And the direction was to find those communities that are interested in that type of development and kind of find ways to kind of ensure compatibility. And that would be more through that zoning code work that you were talking about. So that's the direction we received on those two main issues. The bonuses, the only real change to the rest of the bonuses was there was a resiliency bonus request to put in. There was a policy that said if you're in the coastal high, you could, we should develop a bonus. Council removed that from the plan, or requested it to be removed. So we still have the affordable housing bonus, we still have the green building bonus, and we still have the transit ready corridor bonus. October 9th, there will be a very short presentation by Planning Commission staff to council about what we've done so far and what we're thinking as far as timeline, schedule, possibly doing some type of additional public outreach. February 27th, sorry, that should say the 17th, right? Is it the 17th, Kelly? You don't know. You don't have to know. I think it's the 17th. It's ringing in my head right now, and I apologize. I don't want to get that date wrong. We'll check it before I leave. But that's the workshop for City Council where they will see what we go over the recommendations of changes. They will, if they'd like it and they approve of it, they will transmit it. It goes to the state of Florida for their review. That's a whole other review process that has to happen. And I will confirm that date before I leave, I promise. Next slide. All right, a couple about the zoning code and about, it is the 17th. So it's February 17th, City Council workshop. The local regulations, so we have the comp plan that tells you the vision, that tells you the land uses generally, how big, how much of it can be. It's the zoning regulations and the land development code that actually tell you what it looks like. Tells you how high it is, make sure that you have adequate parking, landscaping, all of that. So that is how we implement the comprehensive plan. Next slide. So this is just a nice little graphic to help you understand, but essentially you'll see the big box there. That is your buildable box. Your zoning will tell you how far you have to set back from the street. It'll tell you how much open space you have to have, how tall your building can be. Sometimes, like in a historic district, it'll tell you very specific things about the look of the building. There's also additional regulations in zoning, including our overlay district, which we have one here in Tampa Heights, which further guide development and incentivize development to fit more cleanly into the built environment. So if you want to take advantage of some of the flexibility in the code and the overlay, you have to do, design your driveways well and, make sure that it doesn't look like a suburban neighborhood. So that's kind of how that overlay works. And we also have a historic district here, as you all know, for part of the community as well. And they have a separate review process that goes through our architectural review committee. So that's a whole other level. But just remember, zoning tells you how big the building is. Comp plan is going to tell you how much of a building you can have. We are in the reason I bring this up is because the comp plan is hopefully coming towards the adoption period. If it gets transmitted in February, it will come back for 2 public hearings in probably March, April. And then at that point, it will become the law of the land as the comp plan. We also are in the process of updating the land development code and the zoning code, which is primarily chapter 27 for all of you people who like to look it up. And essentially, this is a major rewrite of the code. And it's the first one we've had since at least the 80s. It is a really, really good opportunity, given that we are talking about the comp plan and these changes and the growth. And at the same time, we're worried about development not being compatible with our neighborhoods. And so the zoning code and the zoning rewrite and the update is going to be a huge opportunity to try to make sure that we're getting the type of regulations that really make the most sense. Project status is gone through. There's the first deliverable is being reviewed by staff. There is a committee that is, I forget the advisory committee. It's made up of private sector and neighborhood folks. They will then review it and it becomes public for public review as well. And all those comments are being integrated. And there's probably at least 3 major deliverables. So next year is going to be a lot of zoning code. So be ready. Brian, you're off the hook. You don't have to worry about it. All the work you've already done. Next slide. So my takeaways for the evening, this is what I want to leave you with. We've got the vision being set with the comp plan. We need to hear from you all about what you like about it. You need to ask me questions. We'll glad to come back again, talk to you offline. The land development code truly is probably the first time I've seen it to this scale where you've got a comp plan being updated, almost immediately being followed by a major rewrite of the code. So it really is an opportunity to kind of truly implement what the ideas of the comp plan are, which I think is a great opportunity, but we're going to need your help to do it because there's a lot of folks out there who might not be as interested in change and growth, and may see it generally as a negative. And if that's the case, then if they are the ones who we're only listening to, then we're going to get a different kind of code, right? We live right off of Florida Avenue. It is the transit corridor north-south. Change is coming. We know that. Let's make sure it's the best change we can get. And the way we do that is really through good policy and making sure we get the land development code right as we can. So with that, I'm sorry that was a little planning 101, but I'm glad to answer any questions you might have.
Aaron?
Hi, Tanya.
I'm gonna question Evan about vulnerabilities.
Yes.
It requires vulnerability assessments and having conducted a previous one for the city and now the overall one for the county, I'm wondering, is the vulnerability assessment data being used in the decision making for the comprehensive plan? You mentioned the coastal high hazard area, but the vulnerability assessment, which looks all the way into 2050, previously 2040, will identify coastal areas, but also identify areas susceptible to high levels of rainfall, which is going to be one of the biggest, let's say, water impacts that we have.
Yeah.
So has that been integrated into the comp plan?
I will say, so the vulnerability assessment for the city was the most recent adopted version was last year, I think, is when they finished it up and it became real.
Just this past summer, it's actually.
Okay. Maybe it was early this year then is when it did. Okay, so the question had to do, so the state provides, requires a vulnerability assessment, generally requires a vulnerability assessment if you want to use certain grant monies to improve resiliency in your community. So help with sea level rise, help with flooding issues, storm surge, that kind of stuff. This vulnerability assessment is focused on vulnerable, primarily public assets. So parks, roads, sidewalks, pump stations, the whole gamut of them. And so the analysis really models out both sea level rise and flooding events. And as Taryn mentioned, rain being a probably the bigger rising threat that we have, as you've noticed a couple of times in the last year or two, where we've had just events that literally flooded places that had never been flooded before. So that assessment is out there. Now, as to the how much it has been integrated into the comp plan, I will say that most of the comp plan really hinges more on the coastal high hazard area because that's adopted part of the plan. And so the coastal high hazard area is not as robust as the vulnerability assessment. It really just looks at storm surge and evacuation from hurricanes, which does include some areas around, Hillsborough, the river, and all of that. But it's not to the level of detail that the vulnerability assessment is. With that being said, I would say that I think that it's going to be much more integrated into the capital improvements plan, which is when we actually go build stuff as a city. That's our capital improvements. And it's good to know what's most vulnerable so that we can actually harden it first and prioritize those types of things. And I do think there will be more of that within the code. I think the dates and the way that got done, finished, and the code's getting updated, I do think there's a real opportunity to integrate more of that information we've learned in the modeling and all of that into the code work. So no, it's not as integrated per se in the policies outside of that coastal high hazard area type discussion.
Lena?
So. When we talk about areas that are impacted, just like the coastal area, we learned the last several months that there's a part of Tampa Heights that's very important.
Yes, ma'am.
And we don't want to be left out of the benefits that are being considered or the impact of
Right.
that in our area. So hearing that we are in, that's the, that's one.
Mhm.
The next thing is removing of the other streets in Tampa Heights on the trans corridor. One of the things why we liked, personally like our overlay district, is that we're losing diversity in Tampa Heights.
Mhm.
And being able to have those other streets have the benefit of higher density, help us keep the diversity, all levels of diversity. That was important for overlay district and all for this. So, what is the process for us to get back and put those back in consideration
Mhm.
as we look at that density and.
Yeah. So at this point in the process, oh, sorry, repeating the question. I'm glad these people reminded me. The question was, or first the statement was, one of the things that, this is from Lena, one of the things that she liked and a lot of the community liked about the transit ready corridors was the fact that because they were allowing for more density, allowing for some intensity, more intensity of development, they had an affordable housing component as well, that we would help overall in the long term would help protect some of the diversity in character, diversity in population, diversity of incomes, because you would be able to build more different types of housing and more of it in a way that hopefully would not just make, everybody comes in and loves Tampa Heights and then prices everybody else out. That was my summation of it. And then the question was, how do we go about at this point in the process? How would we go about making or making a recommendation for consideration of some of those corridors to be put back in? And the answer is, at this point in the process, it's really a city council, because we are taking pretty direct direction from them. Just like we came back after the 28th of August and had like 5 or 6 different motions that really direct us pretty specifically what they want changed. At this point, it's really going to be a discussion with them. You can do that at public comment on a regular basis, or, I would probably recommend finding ways to communicate with your council more regularly via email and meetings, one-on-ones and things like that in the interim, so that they start to hear that outside of just the council meetings, because they've got a lot on their plate and they need to get that. And I will tell you, those who have the most influence and have had the most influence that's what they do. It's email after email, it's communication after communication. It's like hundreds of emails about things that you didn't think were important but are important to them. And that's what council sees, and that's what they hear.
What struck me, Lena, at that special call hearing, I guess it was August, yeah?
Mhm.
It's in August. Much of the discussion had to do with South of Gandy. I think you know that. There was a lot of discussion about density and transit corridors vis-a-vis that area of the city. There came a point during that hearing when Alan Clendenin just started looking at the list and said, I think we ought to remove these transit corridors. And he just started listing them. And I don't frankly remember Columbus and MLK being among the ones that he said to remove. I guess
He made a list of the ones he wanted in.
Yeah.
Everything else was taken out. So he made the list of what he wanted in, and everything else by default was.
All right, so he did it by
Right.
exclusion.
These are the ones that we want to be the transit ready corridors.
So, but I don't remember there being any ask from the neighborhoods,
Mhm.
for instance, from us, that those items be removed. I think
Right.
he was responding to South of Gandy, and in doing so, we just kind of got picked up. And so I don't remember Columbus and MLK necessarily being part of that discussion, certainly not because we asked them to be removed.
Right.
So as Evan says, I think we get on the phone and we talk to Mr. Clendenin and our new rep, when the new rep is in place, and our other 2 citywide, and see if we can get something changed there.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
No.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry?
This is not a real wet. That's my first direct, the use of PUDs.
Mhm.
Yeah, I understand PUDs, that means typically. Developer wants to do something that is supposed to be allowed.
Yes. Yep.
And so I'm wondering, are there any limitations on, when on the rare occasion, but on the occasions like this week, look at this is more often than not.
Mhm.
it's Western.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if the new comp plan and the new code, first of all, are there any limitations on, what can be considered for PD zoning and will the new, um, regs?
Mhm.
Will they place?
So not a dumb question because PDs are like the topic for land use and zoning in the city. So, oh, sorry. We need to get them a mic.
Yeah.
So the question was about essentially noticing that there was a lot of PDs. There are a lot of PDs at every council hearing and the land use discussions. And a plan development zoning is essentially what's called a site plan zoning. And it's what developers or anybody who wants to develop something that doesn't meet any of the other zoning categories, they can use the site plan zoning category to tweak things and say, I want the building like this, I want a little bit of this, less of that, and they take it to council, council makes a decision. There are a lot of them in the city of Tampa, and one of the reasons there's a lot of them in the city of Tampa is because the zoning code is very old and it has not been updated to reflect development in the last 25, 30 years. So I always say like the comp plan has been giving good vision, good policy, good land use categories, all of that stuff for a long time. The zoning code is still down here. And so this gap is being filled with PDs because ultimately this says you can do all this stuff. The zoning code really doesn't allow a lot of it. And when people, for whatever reason, because there's weird lots, there's people want a slightly bigger house, there's just all kinds of different reasons why you would need a PD. They have to come in and do that PD. So that's why they're one of the main reasons why they're really common. They're not super popular with at least some of the council because it does occupy so much of everyone's time to go through this. It's also very expensive for developers. So as far as what the new regulations, the new zoning code update and those types of things might do to address PDs and how often they're used, yes, that is one of the main focus areas of the goals of what the new code hopefully will accomplish. And I see it right now. We have no draft code on this yet, but generally the way it's been conveyed to this point is it will be having better zoning categories that more closely align with what the comprehensive plan allows. So it helps close in and fill that gap so that you can actually say like, oh, I'm on a corridor with transit. I don't have to ask for a PD because I've got a zoning code that will allow me to build more intense, better design, and you get a better feel for what's coming. The other way they're going to do it is probably make the PD process a little bit more onerous, for lack of a better term. Just they will require more things with your PD. So right now, there's very few rules about what you must do within a plan development zoning, except you must show exactly what you're going to do. If you set up, says, look, you can do a PD in these circumstances and in these circumstances, and you can only vary this much, that's really the type of detail that is not currently in the code. So there is likely to be some tweaking of the PD process to make it a little more limited in scope. So that I could see those two things happening over time. Mhm. 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 Yeah. So the question was, first the statement was, it seems like this presentation was really done in response to certain people, South Tampa, who may be a little bit more anti some of these concepts around transit and things like that. And the question was, is there a possibility for maybe moving forward for certain neighborhoods that may want to see more of this type of development? Is there an opportunity to integrate that into the comp plan prior to adoption? I will say that it's not just south of Gandy, it's not just South Tampa. There is generally, I have experienced this throughout the city, and frankly, just to be honest, the Tampa Heights Civic Association did not come out and make a formal statement of support for the comp plan amendment in August 28th. And the reason they didn't, in my understanding of it and reading the emails, was because there wasn't enough clarity as to what was actually coming down the pipe. And so it's not just south of Tampa or South Tampa. It's everybody needing to understand how these concepts work, because unfortunately, you kind of got to take one step before you take the next step. And there is a little bit of a leap of faith, but because we've got the code coming right after the comp plan, I'm hoping that we don't have to wait long before we get the right regs in place as well. As far as individual neighborhoods doing different things, I think your best strategy right now is to, if there are transit-ready corridors or some concepts that have already been discussed and maybe at some point removed or changed within the comp plan framework so far that you would like to see put back in, I think that's a point of conversation. I wouldn't want to open it up much wider than that, because I really am worried about not accomplishing anything. Just full disclosure, I'm just worried that if we delay it too much longer, we run the risk of just not being able to get any of the good policies that we like across the finish line. So those would be my opinions. I'm glad to talk offline about any of ideas that you might have.
Kelly, you had a.
Corridor, are the roads like all or nothing? Like, can you have Tampa Street and be considered a transit-ready corridor in one section and not another section?
Theoretically, yes. Actually, I think like Fowler east of Florida, maybe. So yeah, so absolutely, it would just need to be defined by, at this point again, by council. Would have to kind of trim it, add it, whatever that may look like.
Other questions?
Just to go back to.
Mhm.
From what I understand.
Mhm. So, okay, so the question again was, has missing middle housing generally been removed from the comp plan as a development type? And this would be, again, your duplexes, triplexes, quads, smaller multifamily type housing. No, there's plenty of policy within the comp plan that speaks to it, but we don't have a code that deals with it right now. But I will say that will certainly be more flexibility in the new code. That's definitely an area of focus. Your issue is just, if you're outside of just about everything, you're not in the TRC, you're going to have a higher land use category, or you're going to have a larger piece of land in order to do that mix, because you just don't have the density. So, like we see it on North Boulevard right now. There's like R20, there's a bunch of R10. It's now being turned to R20 so that they can turn it to townhomes or duplexes or whatever. There's one tomorrow night on the council docket. So that's kind of what they're doing, is they're doing it because that's the only way that they can get those 2 units on a typical lot.
There questions? Jason, anything online?
So there was one question online. Oh, I'm locked out. I will answer one question online. Is that the only one?
There you go. I don't know.
2 questions online. I'll answer 2 questions online. So the first question is, what is the plan for stormwater with new development, given that many places in Tampa Heights drain to Robles Park? The plan for stormwater is first I will say that, to Lena's point earlier, the stormwater department has been prioritizing any of the areas as far as making sure we've got backup generator power, cleaning the, the grates and things like that in areas that we experienced. Milton was the one that surprised everybody, right? With the rain. So I think that that's been more of a focus area. They've got the big maps. They're out there trying to make sure that those areas that were inundated are as ready as they can be for those types of events. So you're not being taken off the list. And there isn't anything special about the comp plan that's directing them to do that or not do that right now. It's very much like we learned a lot about the flood zones and how water is working in the city right now. And so they're trying to do their best with that to be ready. The second part is there's an ongoing master planning effort where the stormwater department, I think there's like 4 engineering firms involved, is looking at every single basin, which think of a basin as all the water in that basin. The rain kind of stays in that basin unless you pump it out and move it. So they're studying every one to identify specific improvements in each one of those basins that you can manage the stormwater with. They're also looking at possibly coming out of that study, there could be changes to the requirements for stormwater. So if you build something new in the future in those areas, in certain areas, they may require you to hold more water on your property for longer periods of time or something like that to try to minimize the impact of new development. Change how much impervious paving you could have or something like that to minimize the runoff, because it is a big impact. But I also say that new development does a much better job than old development with retaining and managing stormwater. So by design, by requirement. So old development, water just flows right off of your driveway into the street and it just goes into the city system. New development has to hold on to it for a period of time to make sure that it's following more of a natural flow off the site. We can argue about whether it works all the time or not, but it is the requirements are much greater for new development as well. So it's kind of both of those things. So new intensity and new development does not necessarily mean that the problem gets worse. But it also, I'm not saying it cures the problem, but those standards for new stuff are much higher than stuff that's been here for 100 years. Yes, ma'am.
Question online.
Oh yeah, I had one more online. Sorry. No, I did it again. Well,
I was just gonna say that with the new development, a lot of them, especially on buildings, take a whole while to think of that. Just because we don't see it, I mean, it's not.
right.
So it's not necessarily a pond that we used to in Mexico.
Right. Yeah. For everybody online, the statement was just for new development, sometimes you don't see where the stormwater is being stored because they can use vaults. They can use things under they can use, there's different strategies that aren't necessarily a pond that holds water. But that's not really land efficient. So the house across the street from me goes underground into a vault and then kind of seeps out of the vault. That's how it works. Last question from online was, what would it take to adjust the vulnerability assessment for the comp plan before it is passed? I feel like you planted this one, Karen. I would argue that I think that the vulnerability assessment is being integrated into our planning from a stormwater perspective, from a capital improvements perspective, and in the code. I don't think that there is a clear path to getting policy in the comp plan at this time that would necessarily make a huge impact to what we are doing in the short to midterm. And I know that sounds like I'm dodging, but I'm just thinking like, I know that we are working with that data for all these other processes. So I would say move the comp plan, get it adopted. And if there needs to be an amendment that further moves forward with something, then I think that that's a perfect opportunity to come up with more policy as we learn and, get something on the books. Yes, ma'am.
The city and the county's vulnerability assessment are different.
Mhm.
City will end up having to update sooner its vulnerability
Yep.
assessment because the numbers that the city used were because of when they started their update, right, for the old NOAA numbers.
Yep.
And for the years 2040 and 2070, the new state requirement standard is the new NOAA numbers, and the target years 2050 to 2070. One of the things that the county is doing, based on our recommendation, my team's recommendation, is that we actually also mapped private property.
Mm.
Though it is not required, we mapped social demographics, so income, age, and private property, because when you look at private property, you can divide it out by the year of housing was built, and you can begin to see the cluster of aging neighborhoods, which helps us understand where the flood impacts will happen. So being able to prioritize the public infrastructure
Mhm.
works if you know where to prioritize the public infrastructure based on where the residential properties are, since 2/3 of all buildings in the city are private family houses.
I'm surprised it's only 2/3.
We're at 8:15. We're a little over the witching hour that I promised you. Is there any
Sorry
other
about that.
burning issue? Anybody else have a question? No? Nothing else? on that?
Please contact me or my colleague Lauren, who's very involved with the comp plan as well. If you have any questions whatsoever, and most of these folks know how to contact me as well. I'm glad to do what I can to help you all learn a little bit more about the planning process that we're undergoing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Is this, Jason, is this your tablet? Thank you all. We're adjourned.